So what we're going to do is we're going to build a soxhlet extractor assembly. We're going to make all the parts for it with an artistic twist. So what I'll do, I'll start off with I'm going to assemble one end of our Allen condenser, and then Katie's going to work on our lemon peel so we can extract limonene, and then Carl's going to assemble the extractor part, and then Rich is going to work on sealing joints onto a flask, and then I'll complete the Allen condenser, and then we'll put it all together. All right, let's get going. So in Eric's PowerPoint, he was discussing different ways to hold things. And he was talking about paper and stuff. And one thing he didn't mention was corrugated cardboard. That's our glassblower's friend, our production piece of equipment that we use quite a bit. So if we have a bubble assembly for our Allen condenser, one way to hold that inside our joint is with corrugated cardboard. So we can slide that up inside, and we have a special joint that has a rounded end. It's normally tooled that way. I had to add a little and then regrind the joint. So then we can bring this bubble condenser, if my fingers are long enough, up into the very tip of it. Now, one of the problems you'll have when you're using corrugated cardboard as a holder is getting it back out. So one little tip I have is I put a tail on it. So I'll take a piece of masking tape, fold it over itself onto the cardboard, so then when I'm done, all I have to do is grab the tail, pull the cardboard out, and it's out of the way. So we'll put our cork in. And if you remember in Eric's talk, he made mention of the keys for your planetary chuck. And what happens if you don't take it out before you turn the lathe on? They become customized. So we'll crank it up, and this is our drip stem. Bring it in nice and close. Warm everything up a little bit. So just heat up the bottom and let it come in. So when you make your bubbles for your Allen condenser, you want to have at least 2 of them being almost the exact same size, so that when you do put them inside, they're going to hold it fairly straight. If you make them all a different size, you'll never get it to run straight enough to seal it up. So we want to make sure that we make a really good ring seal. Especially since we're using color, we want to make sure that it seals in really good. So to get it nice and even, after you make your seal, you want to give it little puffs as it starts to cool down. You don't want to blow too hard so that when you make your last little puff, the glass sets up really fast and then it won't shrink back down. If you stop too soon, it's going to shrink up on you a little bit and you're going to have to blow it up again. So we'll get a good warm out going on this. So with the joint and the grind, whenever you make a seal on a joint like this, you want to make sure that you warm it out all the way up to the grind because the strain will trap right at the end of the grind if you don't warm it out well enough. And if it's going to crack on you from not warming it out well, that's where it's going to crack, is right at the edge of the grind. So you want to kind of run a little warm out up into that grind, but not enough to start to glaze it out. So that should be good. Then we'll let it cool down a little bit. And since we've got the cardboard in there, we want to make sure that everything sets up well. Then we're going to pull the cardboard back so we can seal a hose connection right on the side for our condenser. So we just pull the tail down and pop it on out. So Katie's over there working on her, making her lemon peel.
Yeah, so what I'm doing over here is I layered some white color on the back of a yellow gather. I smooshed it flat, and now I'm pulling out a flat cane. And once I pull this cane out, I'm going to wrap it around a mandrel as you would wrap a coil for scientific glass blowing. The yellow and the white are to represent a lemon peel because that's a really common distillation that you would do with a sock slit extractor setup. For those of you that were at the Northeast Section ASGS meeting back in November, Kyle Meyer made a sock slit extractor, and then we set it up with some ethanol, and Jared Carver did a distillation, and we actually made limoncello right there at the meeting with the equipment we made. That's always fun. In our second year students here, the chemistry class that they have to take is tailored so that the students create apparatus that they then use in the lab, which I think is the coolest. I got a pretty good cane. For this, to wrap it through the mandrel, this is my mandrel. This little washer that's welded on over here acts as a holder, because if you think, if I just tried to wrap this around it, it just wouldn't go. I need something, a placeholder. So I'm gonna weld a little bit of a clear rod onto the end of my cane I just made. That's gonna be my placeholder and go through here. And then I'll show you how to wrap the coil. I wanted to also talk a little bit about what a sock slit extractor is and what it does. So there's all different types of distillation apparatus, and all of them essentially do the same thing with minor differences. For a sock slit extraction setup, its primary purpose is to use the least amount of solvent to do the extraction at hand. So it's set up when Carl gets going here, you'll see he's going to put 2 arms on the side of this socket body over here. One's going to be really cool, and it kind of zigzags back and forth, has a 180 U-bend on it. That's called the siphon arm. And then there's a larger bypass arm. In the socket setup, you have a boiling flask, which we'll see Rich fabricate in a little bit here on the lathe. On top of the boiling flask, you'll see the socket extractor itself, which Carl is fabricating. And then at the very top of that, you'll see, it's called a socket condenser, but it's Allen style, so it's got the bulbs in it like an Allen condenser. Inside the body of the extractor that Carl's making, there's a little piece called a thimble. Inside the thimble is where you put the organic matter. Another good example of what you'd use an socket extraction for would be if you put hot peppers in here, you could extract the capsaicin extract. Lemon peels are more fun to sculpt. I didn't want to do a pepper either. If you guys noticed on the scientific apparatus wall over there, we have a pepper in there already. Okay, I have a cane, got some clear on it. Let me straighten this out. And then I'll do the fun part. I'll wrap it around the mandrel. The hardest part about turning a coil is getting everything set up. You gotta have your mandrel, I have a yoke here, and I have this little cigar box to help me get some height for what I'm gonna do. And your setup, ideally, the tubing or rod, whatever you're gonna turn around the mandrel, you want it set up so that it's kind of laying parallel to your torch and comes right up under the mandrel, so that then you can wrap it around. That's not quite. I'll seal it.
So how you make it out, Carl?
I'm doing swell. All right, so far I did a ring seal for the tube that connects to the siphon tube, which would be the drain to go back down into the boiling flask. And I popped a hole up here so I could put my siphon on. If you noticed, I had to blow through this tube up top because there's a blind seal on this body. So right now, there's only air on the side where my blow hose was. So I had to use the blow tube up here to pop that hole. And now I'm going to seal up the siphon tube.
I'm messing around with aligning this right now. Since this is going to be a lemon peel, I want the white color to touch the mandrel and the yellow color on the outside. I'm just messing around with this little anchor to get it lined up so that I'm in the right spot.
So now that I've got the one end of my condenser done, we're going to let it cool off so then we can finish the other end. And while we're waiting for that,
Perfect.
we'll watch everybody else. And Rich is going to put on a joint on a flask.
Let me show you. It's the edge. For my lemon peel, I want to add a little texture. So I'm going to seal up to this, brace up to it, and I'm going to take my tungsten pick, which is commonly used in scientific apparatus fabrication for filling holes. as you learned earlier from our pal Eric. It's also good for tungsten drilling holes. My artistic students and aficionados might use that as their means to make a bail on a pendant. It's also good for making tiny little dots in my lemon peel.
So Carl is finishing up what we call the siphon tube on the Soxhlet extractor itself. And what that does is, as it fills up with solvent, when it reaches the level of the bend, it siphons all the fluid out of it, and it'll almost completely drain automatically. And if you've never seen that done, it's really cool to watch it happen. And now Rich is getting ready to pull off the neck of his flask. And that's what we call the factory end. That's how you get them when you buy them. And he'll cut that down, he'll pull the neck off, and then he'll bring in his joint and he'll seal it right up. So he'll cut it down. He wants to get it as close to the size of the neck on the joint. And then he'll use a sharper fire and a pair of tweezers. If you remember in Eric's PowerPoint, when Tracy was pulling off the piece of tubing, Rich is going to do the same thing. So he's going to heat it up. He's going to slowly move the fire out so that it just cuts. It just sits in one spot, and then it'll cut the flask open.
Woo!
I think we all used to do that, right? One of the beginning jobs you would do when you worked at a place like Chem Glass was seal necks on the flask. So Rich cleaned off the end of the joint to get the cut mark out. So when he seals that together, you'll have a really nice, clean, transparent seal. And yes, when you're working a production shop, you're throwing rods all over the place. One of the reasons why we wear safety glasses all the time. So Carl's getting ready to put on the bypass. So when you're working on the Soxhlet extractor, what's coming out of the extractor will end up in the flask. As the flask reboils the solvent, it's got to get back up into the extractor, so it travels up the bypass tube, around the siphon, and back into the extractor, down to the material that we want to separate. Whether it's lemon peel, mint leaves, cinnamon, what? Coffee, tea. That's how we make decaf coffee and tea. We set it up through a Soxhlet extractor system. The solvent extracts the caffeine. What's left over is decaf coffee or tea. And the nice part about the Soxhlet extractor systems, you can set them up to run, and they can run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, depending on how much material you're trying to extract. And they come in smaller sizes than this and a couple feet tall. So they can hold lots and lots of material. So Rich has got his neck on. So the fun part about making the sock slit extractor is once you start, you don't stop until you're done. So Carl will eventually cut the end off of the tube and bend it around and attach it to the upper part of the extractor. Watching. Katie is prepping up her lemon peel.
Just about done.
That we'll put down into the thimble, which will eventually go into the extractor. So there's different types of thimbles that they use. Some of them are like the one I made with a fritted disc inside. So it'll hold the material, keep it in place, and allow the solvent to go through to be able to pull out whatever it is they're trying to extract. Other thimbles will be made out of tissue paper, plastic vials, different things. So one thing I'm going to show you now is how we make our thimble. So we'll start off with a piece of tubing and a pre-made disc, and these come in all various porosities. This one happens to be a fine. That's all I had in this size, but they'll come from fine all the way up to extra coarse. And to hold it in place, I make these holders. Oops. That will hold the frit in place. So it's just a ceramic material with some glue on it that fits right inside of my tube. And I have a funnel. That fits right in here. So that when I put my frit in, it's going to hold it nice and straight. So I'll slide that in there, get my blow hose. So how's it coming, Carl?
Coming great. Almost done.
So in scientific, we use all kinds of holders. We use our imagination to dream up new ones all the time to try to make things happen quicker and efficiently. There. So the other side of my holder is just a piece of tubing with some more of the ceramic wrap. You can use masking tape. Duct tape doesn't work as well. But the ceramic tape with the glue on it works really good. So we can slide that in there. And that will hold my frit in place. So you don't want to hold it super, super tight because it's always a little bit smaller than your tubing. You want to let it ride a little bit. And then we'll just take our hand torch, or depending on the size, you could use a small cradle burner or ribbon burner. And we'll slowly start to heat it up. And as the glass starts to soften up, we'll start to just kind of let the carbon rod sit on top. And we'll just bring it down till it touches. And then we'll heat it up real good because you want to bond the outer tube to all those little pieces of glass. And then when we stick them together, we want to give it a little blow because we want to lift up the glass along the edges because we don't want to have any real sharp edges right along the edge of the frit or it'll cause it to break. We'll take out that holder. And then we'll just come out to the end. We want to leave about a 10 millimeter space at the bottom to allow the solvent to come out. We'll just stretch it a little bit, let it cool off. So how's it coming, Katie?
It's going good. I'm making extras. I'm
All
making
right.
great time.
So I'll let that glass cool off a little bit, and then I'll sharpen my fire up. And I'm going to come right in on the top edge. And I'm going to slowly start working it out, getting it thinner and thinner. I'm just going to follow it down with my torch. Just let it come apart. Get this guy out of my way. Then I'll just come in and heat this up. And I'll just let the end heavy up a little bit. Open it up, get it nice and even. And then we have two options. We can let this cool off. I can run it through the leer. And then we can cut it with the saw, or I can just heat it up, push it in a little bit. Because we want to allow the solvent to come out from the thimble. And if I don't give it a pathway to drain, it'll just seal itself and it'll never drain out. So now I have 4 little openings that will allow it to drain. And then we really want to soak this for a while because we need to get the heat into the frit itself so that it doesn't come apart as the outer glass cools. Looks like Carl's about done on his. So then I would leer this, and then we would cut it to the length that we need, fire polish it, and then leer it again to make sure that the frit is dry. So now we have the frit sealed in there. And what all that is glass that's been ground up, run through a filter and a screen to come up with the different sizes. Then it's put into a dish with a weight on top. They're put in an oven. They're compressed for a certain amount of time, and that'll give them the porosity that we need for the fluids to go through it. A really fine frit is used a lot for filtering out gas, dirt and gases. A really coarse frit will allow fluids to run through really easily, but hold back larger material like plant matter and stuff like that.
Can I start setting up our finished piece? So in scientific glass blowing, we work off of blueprints. So this is the blueprint that Carl fabricated the soxhlet extractor off of. This is the siphon arm. That's the bypass arm. Drip tip.
Yeah, that's gonna be.
Let me show you another print. Here is a print of the soxhlet condenser that has Allen bulbs in it. Shout out to Chem Glass for letting us use your prints and for sponsoring the event. One of the things that makes scientific glass blowing so difficult is that we work within very strict tolerances, sometimes less than a millimeter. In our classes, Rich, Carl, Bob, and I, we give our students assignments wherein we hand them a blueprint, we do a demonstration, and then we give them tolerances to work within, just like they would in industry. And our students take CAD classes. It's really important that not only can they read a blueprint, but they could render one. If you go and work in industry, you have you're making stuff that has been made before. Then when you go and work in like a university or R&D and you're making apparatus that doesn't exist yet and you're formulating it, it's really, really important that you can render a drawing in order to communicate with your, whoever it is that you're working with. Oh, this is also the soxhlet. If you want to show this, this just shows a side view of the bypass arm. Does anybody have any questions about not only our demo, the chemistry behind it, or Salem County College's programs in general? I'm happy to field questions right now while we have a lull. Patrick, could you please give him a microphone? Yes. Thank you.
Did you put any wax on that mandrel, or?
That's a great question. So the mandrel is steel, and periodically we'll put aquadag or graphite on there to keep it from, your coil or whatever, in my case, my flat cane, from sticking. You're welcome. Thank you. Good one. Oh, you ready?
Rich, will you explain to me how you're prepping the holes for the 45-degree side seal?
Center's 45. I don't mark the hole. After you've done arguably 10,000 of these, it sort of gets
You remember.
a little redundant. We got our hole. We're taking the center of the hole out. Blow it up. Heat it up. Blow it out. Pop it off.
Are you prepping one side to be at more of an angle?
All sides at one time. Egg-shaped hole. Tap it, make sure it's on. This is a good advertisement when you buy the burner, buy the rack and pinion. Warm our neck up. And what we're doing here is we're polishing the inside edge of the wall. You don't want that sharp edge there. It won't clear up. It takes twice as much heat to clear up. Round it over, dog ear to back. Heat the hole up, roll it front to back, and there's your stick. Oh, don't panic. Back in.
Did you make this holder?
No, 45 millimeter center to center.
Do you have a personal favorite apparatus to fabricate?
No, I tend to gravitate towards the larger, hotter stuff. It just seemed like more of a challenge. The bench work was something that I always enjoyed, but it definitely the larger, heavier objects that we make it work, they're challenging, extremely challenging. I mean, almost zero tolerance. I mean, you get one shot to get it right. If you don't, you know, it's an expensive loss. So, yeah, I enjoy the more challenging aspects of my profession. What's that?
I hope this isn't proprietary. The lathe department at TOSA would do like $500,000 of scrap every year, just from their like $1,000 a foot tubing.
We're very fortunate that we have very proficient glass blowers, so our loss ratio is very, very low, extremely low, actually. You can ask Carl, Bob, and Katie. They were all employees there. They'll vouch for it. We have a great system, and it starts out. It's the same thing we teach you guys here. It's repetition. And don't get over your head. Don't get over your skis when you get into something. And apply proper technique repetitiously, and the end is somewhat predetermined. You know, if you do everything right, the outcome should be inevitable. Sometimes it's not, but it is what it is. Absolutely.
Talk about that?
So over here, Bob's doing the second ring seal on what is actually the top half of the soxlet condenser. He just brought the jacket down around the end of the colored bulbs. Right now he's just heating it, really letting that heat sink in to the ring seal to make sure there's no creases on the inside that would cause cracking later down the road. Part of the reason, above and beyond working within strict tolerances, what makes scientific glass blowing really difficult is that everything has to be clean and perfect. Whenever you have a seal there can't be any blemish in it, if you will, because all of the stuff we're making is going to be used in a laboratory. It's going to have heat and pressure buildup inside of it, and if there's any imperfection in your welds, those things would fail under vacuum and could potentially cause someone bodily harm, and also ruin your experiment and all the money that you put into it. Bob will just pop that open. And next step is to seal, do a little straight seal. This is the peel. This is the famous move. I think we all learned it at chem class. Ready? Let me get out of your way. Set up the...
Go ahead, send my button.
Do you see this one? The socks are... That's amazing.
So I want to warm this out a little extra before I put the hose connection on. And I disconnect it and move the tailstock out of the way because it makes it easier to see. One thing that's you'll find is one lathe does not fit all.
What color tubing are you using, Bob?
Clear.
That's a Carl question. Hey, Carl, somebody asked what color are we using for the bulbs?
Oh, so it's molten ore, gold ruby, and molten ore gold amethyst with jet black lippies.
Fancy.
So Carl made up this part in his home studio. I made a colored bypass for the sock slit with some China white and China blue and dropped it on the floor on the way in. So. So on your lathes, if you're considering getting a lathe, there's a lot of things you have to think about. One is, of course, how big the bore is, how big the chucks are, but also how far off the floor it is. So some lathes, depending on how they're set up, are going to be really close to the floor. You can sit in a chair and work on them. And others are going to be really high off the floor. And then if you're really tall, it doesn't matter which one you get. They're not high enough. And if you're on the challenge, the vertical challenge side, they're all too high. So one thing you can do is you try to find a nice medium to where if you like to stand up like I do, you want to have something that's about this high so that you can get up over and see what's going on. Makes it easier to line things up. And if that doesn't work, then you get yourself a box and you stand on it. Come on, Torch. So we'll warm this out. And then the interesting part about oxalate extractors is when you put them together, you've got your flask on the bottom that holds your solvents. You've got the extractor in the middle that holds your extraction material. And then you have your oxalate Allen condenser that sits on the top. And it has an open port to allow the pressures to relieve themselves. But you don't lose anything out because the solvent doesn't evaporate. But because you build up such pressure, because you're boiling everything, you want to be able to release it. So we'll warm this out, and then we'll pop the other, pop the end. I'll give that a quick fire polish. So like in science, scientific glass, your art glass blowers can use the lathe as another tool to help in their exploration of what it is they want to do. Because you never know when the time's going to come along when you need to combine art and science. Oh, we forgot our thimble
Oh, we did.
with our limonene in it.
I got Tweezies. Got it.
Got it.
Oh,
Oops.
no.
There, we'll go sideways.
Let's slide it.
There we go. Got it?
Yeah, I got it. Yay! Ready? There you go.
Good color job, Carl.
Yes.
Nice lemon peel, Katie.
Thank you.
That's going to be hot.
That's hot. That's what it is. So, y'all got questions?
Why would you use a oxalate extractor as opposed to like a condenser coil type setup?
So oxalates are specifically used when you want to utilize the least amount of solvent. And this bypass arm, let me move this stand. This bypass arm, so you have your solvent down here in the flask, right? And you have your lemon peels in the thimble there. And the whole system is set up so the amount of solvent you have is basically retained the whole time. It just gets refluxed over and over again, so it's not wasteful. Depending on what solvent you're using, if it's a solvent that's safe for human consumption, when you finish this extraction, for this example, the lemon peels we're doing, we would do this extraction with ethanol, food safe, then we could take this right away and consume it. If it was something you were extracting with a more volatile solvent, for example, like methanol, which is very toxic to us, you would do the extraction, then you would run this through a different apparatus to remove the toxic solvent. Yay! All right, your turn. You voted. Thanks, Carl.
Any more? There's one.
I got a question for Bob.
Yeah.
So, being in this industry for as long as you have, what is something that you still wish to see done with this material or seen done in the glass community?
The scientific world is constantly changing. So the materials that we use are also changing with it. Along with your basic Pyrex, lime glass, variations thereof, there's new exotic glasses being made every day that are being used in ways we could never imagine. Not only are they used in computer chips, in fiber optic ware, but they're also being used in studies to age the universe, show the existence of gravity. There's glasses being made now that don't use any silica at all. And what their potential is in future is up to your imagination, really, because the glasses such as Gorilla Glass was invented way before there was anything close to a touchscreen computer. They didn't know what to do with it. They put it on the shelf. Apple came to Corning and said, do you have anything that would work better on our screens? Because we've got this touchscreen idea, and somebody said, ooh, remember that stuff that Joe made 30 years ago? Let's try that. And bam, brought them out of the doldrums and made them a huge corporation again. So we never know. Some of the glasses that were made for the vials for the COVID vaccines were all special glasses that have certain properties of their own. And they, Mike Sousa's worked with some of the weirdest glasses you can imagine, and they go, you think about the prices you pay for color. Some of the glasses he's worked with, if we were to make something like that out of those glasses, that thing would be worth $500,000. So, I mean, that's where we're going with glass and with science. And hopefully, Salem will be part of that. As you guys and girls go out and expand and continue to grow our community, you're going to be involved in a lot of this research. So, we don't know where it's going to go. It's up to you guys.
Hi. Oh, it's on. Okay. So I was wondering how the Frit component is made.
How the Frit?
Yeah.
What they do is they take, some companies would take scrap glass, like Chem Glass used to save barrels full of all their scraps, and they take them and they grind them down, and they'll run them through sieves to filter them out into different sizes, and then they put them in a little dish, and they put a little weight on it, and they put them in an oven. and they'll run them for a certain temperature at a certain amount of time, and that fuses the glass together, but it doesn't melt it. So it's compressed on itself, and that's what keeps it together. And that's kind of what makes it hard to seal them together, because when you do seal them into a piece of tubing like I did, if you don't warm it out, if you don't seal it in good, then what will end up happening is as the tube itself cools, it'll pull that Frit apart. So it has to cool down really slow so that it allows everything to expand. So you need to get heat inside. The really big ones that we would seal up, we actually would put them in a toaster oven and heat them up to 500 degrees before we even put them inside the glass. Because they were so big, by the time we heated up the outside, the centers would still be cold, and then they would crack right through the middle. But that's how they use them, and they use them for all different things. Like I said, they use them for filter out gases, the real fine ones, to hold lemon peel. They use the really coarse ones, so it allows the solvent to go through. And they use them in bubblers and all, and they make them in different shapes and sizes too. They make them in tubes, so you can have a Frit that's actually a tube, and seal it to the end of a piece of tubing. Any other questions?
Hello. I don't have a specific question, but on behalf of the students, I just wanted to say thank you for everything that you guys have done for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We love you guys.
I know I've had fun. I don't know about you guys.
Katie, I had a question for you and for Dan. You used a technical term. I didn't know if it was French. Smush. Smush. Was that a South Jersey term?
Yeah, that's a South Jersey thing. Smush it.
I'd like to thank you all too.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thanks, Dennis.